this election eve. Just a little more than 12 hours from now, polls will be open across New York State with all eyes on the closer than expected race for governor. Both candidates out today doing some last-minute campaigning. Not surprisingly, both candidates are pretty focused where most of the votes are, the New York City area. Republican challenger Lee Zeldin, you can see here, had a campaign event focused on crime at a subway station in the Bronx. That was the only official event that we got from his campaign today. Meanwhile, incumbent Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul also in the Big Apple. She had 4 morning events on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, at a subway station, a diner, a housing complex, and a community center. Then around lunchtime, she went a little bit north and visited a senior center in Harlem. She is now en route here to Western New York. We'll show you a live look inside the now inside the Statler in downtown Buffalo, where she will rally with local elected Democrats. This event starts at 6:25 this evening, Hochul's final scheduled campaign event before polls open at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, we are getting a better understanding of how many people decided to cast a ballot early for this midterm election. 2 on your side's Claudine Ewing is looking through those numbers for us tonight. Hey, Claudine.
Good evening to you, Michael. Across the state, almost 1.2 million people voted early during the 8-day period that ended yesterday. Keep in mind that only counts people who voted in person. That number does not include absentee ballots, either by mail or that can be dropped off at the polling places. We got the numbers for right here in Western New York. In Erie County, more than 70,000 people cast an early ballot. That's a lot higher than last year's general election, but there are a lot more races on the ballot this time, including governor. Niagara County saw almost 10,000 early ballots cast, and Chautauqua County wasn't far behind with more than 7,000. If you add up all 8 counties in our region, almost 100,000 people took advantage of early voting. Now, the early voting totals might also tell us something about voter enthusiasm. We mentioned 70,000 early votes in Erie County. That represents about 11% of registered voters. Statewide, only 9% of those registered took advantage of early voting. This is Kathy Hochul's home county. Maybe that will help her. On the flip side, you can look at New York City. There are only 8% of registered voters cast an early ballot, lower than the statewide average. That could be good news for Zeldin. Now, in most counties, tomorrow night we'll get the early vote totals earlier in the night, and the day of votes usually take a little bit longer, although some more rural counties wait until they get all of the votes counted, and then they'll release it all at once. Michael?
Yeah, and always some surprises as we bring in those numbers. Claudine, I know that you are going to be with the Hochul campaign in New York City tomorrow night. Our colleague Rob Hackford will be with the Zeldin campaign also in New York City. And you'll both have live reports beginning on Most Buffalo. Certainly could end up being a very late night if this race is as close as the polls suggest. And so I want to ask you about those polls and what they're showing us now as the final surveys come in just hours before we get to actually start voting.
Michael, no doubt about it. The race has certainly tightened from where it was a few weeks ago. The Real Clear Politics average of recent polls has Hochul up 6.2 percentage points. She's over that critical 50% mark, so her campaign is happy with that. 538's poll of polls gives Hochul an even bigger lead with a 97% chance to win. But we all know the polls are sometimes wrong, and this one is way too closer than most people expected. So Michael, we'll have to wait and see what happens when the polls close and the numbers roll in.
Yeah, lots of other races on the ballot, but of course, a lot of coverage on this one, something we'll continue to follow. And again, that Hochul event is tonight. We'll be covering both campaigns at 11 o'clock tonight. Claudine, thank you.